Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie & Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. Hello there, and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I am your host, Bryan Abercrombie. I'm here with my partner, Sanchez, and all-around bad boy.
Hello.
And we are going to talk to you about Texas law, and we're going to cover a wide variety of topics on this podcast. Our goal here is to talk about different things affecting the law and different things that might be affecting you. And nothing on this podcast is designed to be legal advice or replace the advice of a competent attorney. Both Sam and I are practicing attorneys in the state of Texas, and we do have a law firm. But we do want to bring you some information, and we wanted to talk to you about law. So, Sam, you got anything to add?
No, I think you summarized it perfectly. We definitely want to give people good information, and I think entertain them a little bit. But if they want legal advice, we absolutely want them to reach out to a lawyer and get that excellent legal advice from their attorney.
So we always start out with a little bit of entertaining tidbits. So we'll talk about divorces in the news. So, Sam, you got anything for us?
Yes, in the news, all those breakups, all those people, those divorces, those separations. I guess the most current one that we want to kind of touch base on, Miley Cyrus, Liam Hemsworth. They were wed December 2018. Seems like they're calling it off. So, major problems anytime you come into a celebrity separation, divorce, but it's just the same as if it were you and I. A lot of the factors play into the same situation.
So I guess Miley's going in there like a wrecking ball,
huh? She is. She's decided it's done. And, a big part of that, I would tell you, obviously one of the things that in a divorce, we're always going to tell you, any good lawyer is going to talk about social media, your presence in the media is important. But, you want to make sure that you're not posting things that are inappropriate. Recently, Miley was seen kissing another woman on a boat off the coast of Italy, which is great for some people, but in relation to divorce, not so good.
Yes.
In agreement with that, Bryan?
I am. That's obviously when you're in the spotlight, anything, and most people going through divorces obviously are not in the spotlight, but what you post on social media can come back to haunt you, especially in a courtroom. So you got to be real careful about what you put out there.
Agreed. And so I'm sure that will come back into play in their upcoming divorce proceedings. It didn't seem like her still husband. Now in California, there is legal separation. In Texas, there is not legal separation. So make sure that wherever you are, whatever state you're in, you're talking to your attorney or getting some advice from legal counsel before you decide what you can and cannot do through a separation process, because obviously no one has yet filed for divorce in that case, but I'm sure it'll be forthcoming.
So one thing we wanted to talk to you about in this podcast is different areas that affect you in Texas, or that could affect you. And one of the things that's a big effect on people right now is child support. So we thought this topic would be completely relevant and really, really hit home with a lot of people, because there is going to be a change to the child support law coming in September, on September the 1st. So, Sam, you want to give us a rundown of that?
Absolutely. So it looks like the cap in Texas, we have both a minimum and a maximum, and it may vary by whatever state you're in, but we're going to kind of deal with Texas at the moment. We'll tell you that there is a minimum and a maximum. So the maximum amount in the state of Texas is about to go up, to $9,200 from $8,550. So the effect of that is, obviously, if you're a high wage earner, then potentially you may want to finalize your matter before that kicks in. Now, obviously, you don't have a lot of days. We are the 20th, and this should kick in September 1st, 2019. But if you're able to do so, right now, the maximum for one child that you would pay is around $1,710. It's going to go up to about $1,840. So if it was two children, you're at $2,150. You're going up to $2,300. Three children, you're going to go up to $2,760. Four children, about $3,220, et cetera, because those are in 5 percentage point increases as they calculate those in the state of Texas.
And what a little bit about the background of this is the Texas legislature a number of years back passed a child support cap, and at that time the child support cap was $7,500. I think it originally started at $5,000, then it went up to $7,500, and then it went up to $8,550, and now it's up to $9,200. So basically, the statute that they passed built in a mechanism where the Attorney General every so often can go in, the Attorney General's Office for Child Support Division, that is, can go back in and modify those child support numbers. So it is something that we are faced with as family law practitioners. We're faced with it every couple of years. They do make an adjustment like this. But as far as the history of child support goes, if you want me to give a little background, Sam, I can.
Yeah, please.
So basically, child support was originally set up, obviously, for the non-custodial parent, the parent that didn't have custody, to pay some money to the custodial parent based on the amount of time that one parent had over the other parent. So originally, way back when they first passed these possession orders and things like that in Texas, the difference in time was about 20%. So they said, okay, we'll make child support 20% of the income, of the net income, to compensate for that difference in time. And then for two kids, it's 25%. For three kids, it's 30%, and so on and so forth. Up to I think they don't go higher than 40%, right, Sam?
Correct.
And so basically, what's happened over a number of years is that the visitation order, the possession order in Texas, has been slowly changed and morphed into where it's getting closer and closer to 50%. So these possession orders in Texas get around 45 to 48% of the time now. And the child support, on the other hand, hasn't changed at all. So you're still paying that, even though you might be closer to 50% these days on your possession time. The child support is still the 20% of your net income up to that cap.
Absolutely correct. And I mean, the thing that really, you want to make sure is if you're going to go through this process, child support's a big part of what's going to go forward, whether you agree to it or not. The law most of the time is going to impose it. So, as we're talking, or you're sitting down contemplating, do I want to end this relationship? Or even if you're not married, how does that look with children? Make sure that you do a little research to figure out financially how that's going to impact you if you guys are not going to be together as a couple anymore, because that financial obligation will follow you.
And let's talk a little
for 18 years.
Yes. And let's talk about when child support ends in Texas, and let's talk about, what's the minimum child support. We talked about the maximum. Let's talk about the minimum, right?
Yep, absolutely. So the minimum child support obligation is typically going to be imputed minimum wage, 40 hours a week. So, right now that puts the dollar threshold at about $236 in Texas for a child support calculation. Now, it can go both above the guideline and below the guideline amount based on what's presented to the court. So there's still fact-intensive inquiries that a court can consider based on your specific situation as to whether or not they're going to stay below. It might be, $150 based on your living situation and current expenses. Or if you're a multimillionaire and you're thinking, hey, the cap for one child sounds great. Well, just understand that the court can absolutely go beyond that with justification.
Now, does the court go beyond that? I mean, in a lot of instances, what are the reasons why a court would go beyond? Let's say someone is a millionaire. And let's say they're a professional athlete, they're a millionaire. You have this child, and you got to pay child support. What's to keep that child support from being $10,000 a month?
Yeah, it depends. A lot of times, as an example, one of the things would be, does that child have a particular special need? So, as an example, private school might be considered a special need. So, if the court looks at it and says you have the ability to pay and have been paying the costs associated with private school, and this child is an exemplary student, very embedded in that. The court can use what we call best interests to vary from the guideline and say, no, I want you to pay the private school tuition as support. And we all know private school tuition can be extremely high. So could that be a consideration? Sure. Or let's say your child has special needs. They could be medical. Let's say that a child has substantial and significant medical concerns that require heavy medication or, very expensive medication to keep them healthy and well. Then a court can take into account those kinds of parameters as to whether or not they want to go beyond guideline support for an individual who is a high wage earner and has the ability to pay that. They're still going to take into account, can you pay it? But if you can, you sure want to be careful about who and what you present in front of that court to make sure that you don't walk out with a dollar amount that doesn't feel good.
So let's talk about me. Let's say I'm in that situation and I'm not a high wage earner, but I got a kid who plays select baseball and plays select soccer, and there's all kinds of fees associated with that. What am I looking at there?
Most of the time in a situation like that, they're not really going to go above guideline. You're probably going to still be within the parameters established by the statute. Now, if you told me that your child is a superstar, he's got the kind of talent, he's a LeBron James.
Well, he is, Sam, but I'm looking through dad eyes. So
No, I believe you. I've met him. He absolutely is a superstar. So I would tell you that in that situation, it's absolutely possible. The court could look at it and say, is it going to be detrimental to that child? And if so, you've been paying it. Why wouldn't I obligate you to continue to pay part of it or all of it as additional support or above guideline support? So that can be a consideration.
So Sam, you've got a couple of kiddos that are over 18. So let's talk about your situation. Let's say, mom wants to get child support over the age of 18. What are the circumstances there?
Well, the good news is in the state of Texas, that's not likely to happen. Child support ends at either the age of 18, age you reach majority, or at the time that you graduate from high school, the latter of the two. So whichever happens first is when it's going to, is going to be when that child support obligation ends. Now, could you be obligated to pay child support beyond that age? Yes. Let's say that during the time that the child is alive, that child develops some type of special need that is going to require a parent to continue to provide care, or that child is not going to be able to be self-sufficient when they turn 18 and graduate from high school. Then yes, absolutely. Child support can go on. It can go into adulthood. It can be permanent depending on the situation and the facts that surround that child.
And each one of those cases is pretty fact specific, when you say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're going to want to definitely talk to a lawyer and get some good advice if you feel like those are some of the parameters that you might be dealing with as you go forward in relation to a child support obligation. Talk to a lawyer and get some good advice.
So let's say I'm a guy and I'm about to go through a divorce, and what kind of things do I need to be looking at, as far as so I know what I'm facing in terms of child support. I mean, how do I do the calculation on my own? How do I figure all that stuff out?
Sure. I think a big part of it obviously is, we use net resources in the state of Texas to establish child support. And the way we calculate your net typically is we're going to get your gross. We're going to give Uncle Sam his share. We're going to subtract any union dues that you might be paying. We're also going to subtract health insurance premiums that are being paid for the child if you're obligated to do so, or you do so through your employment. And then the rest is going to stay in for the most part. So everything else that you see in there is now your adjusted net. At that point, you're going to apply the percentages, and then you'll be able to kind of calculate a rough estimate.
And that includes
there are a lot of different websites.
And that includes your fringe benefits too that you might receive, like if you get money for a company car, or you get a bonus, or you get overtime. Some of that stuff could be calculated in there, correct?
Absolutely. And where we see a lot of clients that'll get into trouble is they look at the pure income. They don't look at adjusted amounts as an example, overtime. They're like, well, overtime isn't guaranteed. But the way the court typically looks at something like that is they're going to go back and they're going to say, show me your last 3 pay stubs, show me your last 2 years worth of tax statements. And if there is a fluctuation in your income, then a lot of times what they're going to do is create an average, and they're going to calculate child support off of that average. So if you're out there and you're contemplating, this relationship may end and I'm just sucking up overtime because, it sounds great and gravy's always nice to have on top of your meal, be careful about that situation, because as you go and increase your income and it's not guaranteed, and then you go in and have child support calculations done through a divorce or through a suit affecting parent-child relationship, then a court can absolutely impute that income on you to create a much higher dollar amount in child support than normally would be the case.
Okay, so let's talk about when child support can be changed. Let's say I'm already divorced. I've got my child support order. I'm paying my child support. I get a big raise at work. When can child support be changed? Does it automatically change, or is there something that has to happen?
Well, there's usually two mechanisms that you're going to be able to do in the state of Texas to modify child support. One is if child support was established through a divorce, it's usually going to be set and maintained for a 3-year period subsequent to the divorce. So for 3 years, nobody can get in there and change anything either up or down unless there's something substantial, significant. Somebody loses their job. There's exigent circumstances, basically. Now, post that, it can be modified by either party every year. And so it can be done on motion of either party that says, hey, income has dropped, income has increased. And typically that requirement is an increase of 20% of the net, or a change in the child support calculation of more than $100. If you can answer yes to either one of those, you've got legs to stand on and go back to court. Now, what happens if neither party is going to go in, but there is we usually call them domestic relation offices in the state of Texas. So they're child support enforcement offices. They're usually in the bigger counties across the state, but they will keep track of child support entry dates. And so they will send out correspondence without anybody asking to each party that says, hey, it's been X amount of time since your child support was entered. Is it time to review it? Do you want us to review it? We can recalculate it. And so depending on if either party responds, so if you're the obligor, meaning that you're having to pay the child support, you're probably saying, no, I've gotten some raises and I'm just getting comfortable. Please don't review it. And the other party is saying, I think they've gotten some raises and they're buying some cars and taking vacations. Wouldn't it be nice to see if it's time to get more child support? Either party can start that process. The Office of the OAG does that on their own, or what we call legally sua sponte. And once they do that, then they'll file a request for parties to come in. You guys can negotiate a dollar amount. If it's agreed, then a lot of times they don't care as long as dollar amounts are right, and they'll move on. But if it's not agreed, then they'll file pleadings for the party that is entitled to child support and try to seek a modification to the court.
That Latin you're using in there, that represents some fancy book learning, Sam.
Every once in a while they sent me to school and I tried not to eat all the books.
So let's talk about, let's say I have 5 children. And, does my child support stay the same all the way through? When do I get relief on that?
Sure. There's what we call a step down typically. Now, this is not something that has to be in place. It's typical. It means that, like, by agreement, you might agree to not having to step down and paying the same amount of child support irrespective of how many children. But typically, when I said that there's going to be an incremental increase based on the number of children by percentage, it's usually 5% per child, starting at 20% going up. Now, if you have children outside of that relationship, meaning that you maybe were previously married or had a child with another person outside of that particular relationship, then there is usually also a reduction by percentage on that side as well. Now, it's going to depend on kind of how you said it, but it's usually 2.5% reduction. So 5% up for every child within a relationship, 2.5% offset for children outside that relationship. Okay, so if you had 5 children, typically what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, when the 5th one turns 18 or graduates from high school, the latter of the two, we're going to step that child support obligation down, because there's no reason for you to continue to pay that dollar amount if that child is no longer a part of that household. Child support is, a lot of people get confused on this, Bryan. I know it's one of the things I hear a lot is, I just feel like my child support is not going to my children. Well, unfortunately, in the state of Texas, child support is really for the other parent. While it's to benefit the child, it's really for the other parent. The cost difference is based on a disproportionate division of time, typically. And so that cost, that dollar transfer from the parent with less time to the parent with more time, is that equalization of expenses associated with rearing children. So when you look at it and you say, okay, well, that child's no longer living there, well, then I shouldn't be obligated to pay that other parent that dollar amount. And that's where they'll kind of come with that adjustment. But it typically drops 5% per child as a child ages out of that process.
And then when your last child turns 18, then it goes away completely.
Everybody has a party that day. Well, most people have a party that day.
Let's talk a little bit about retroactive child support, because a lot of times you see people coming in, oh, my kiddo is 5 years old. I haven't had, I've never been ordered to pay child support. Now she wants child support. And now this Attorney General's office who's coming after this child support is saying that I have to pay retroactive child support. What do I do?
Yeah, wow. Well, I mean, it's a tough spot to be in. I'm not going to lie. The law says that if there has not been a child support order, then the law affords parties the opportunity to go back up to 4 years in retroactive support if it was due and owing during that time period. And depending on the age of the child and how long that has been, they can even go back and include birth expenses. So that can be, prenatal care. That can be hospital birth expenses that were associated with the birth of that child. So depending on the age of that child, they can go back to some pretty substantial amounts.
And that's one of those things that is within the discretion of the judge to decide. So if you're in front of a judge and the judge is making a ruling on that, they're going to look at things like how much you provided to the child. If you provided diapers or formula or gave that child some form of support over the years, maybe it wasn't monetary, but maybe it was helpful. That the judge can decide what that retroactive number is, and if you've been helping out, if you've been there and you've been doing things, then you're likely to get a little bit of relief there, I would think.
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend that if a client's in a situation where they're going to have a child and they feel like, hey, what's the best thing to do? It's obviously be active and involved in that child's life if they can and they want to be. If they don't, then they really need to seek the advice of legal counsel to try to get that situation rectified before they find themselves years down the road with a huge balloon price tag that they didn't expect to see.
Well, let's talk about this, because I get this a lot, coming into my office. Is child support negotiable?
Absolutely. The good thing about family law in the state of Texas is really based in a foundation of contract law. Because, if you think about the history of obviously marriage, it's really just a contract between families as to how we're going to pass assets from one generation to the next. Well, that fundamental idea still exists in family law. And so you can absolutely contract to pretty much anything that doesn't violate criminal law or civil law, okay? And so in relation to child support, if you guys want to agree that, hey, child support's going to be $0 or child support's going to be 50% of what the state guideline obligation is going to be, you can absolutely agree to that. Now, you just got to remember, there's still a guy or a woman who's in a robe sitting on a bench who's going to have to sign off on this to make it in order. And judges still have the ability to look at any order that crosses their bench as to whether or not they feel that is in the best interest of children. Most of the time, courts just look at it and they go, hey, yeah, I'll sign off on that. If you guys agree, I agree, because it makes it easy for them. But there are going to be instances where you're going to want to make sure and have discussed it with an attorney to figure out the court that you're in front of and whether or not a court is going to be willing to approve lower amounts. They'll always approve higher amounts. I've never seen a judge do one that it was an agreed higher amount and them say no. But, lower amounts below the statutory guideline amount, a lot of times are scrutinized pretty heavily by courts. So make sure you get some legal advice before you go in and try to do that.
So like I said, I mean, this is obviously an area of law that affects many, many people. And it's one of those things that you got to look at, and nothing beats the advice of a good attorney who knows this area of law and can adequately adequately instruct you and answer all your questions. In addition, nothing beats a good attorney that can go down and present your case if needs be in front of a court or with the Attorney General's office or whatever the case may be, because Texas does have some special courts that just handle child support issues, and you got to be aware of those things and the various pitfalls that can happen there. So you got
without a doubt.
And So one of the things you also need to consider is, along with any child support orders, you always consider the possession order, and you consider the possession times, because a lot of times in these special courts, they're called 4D courts in Texas. A lot of times they don't talk too much about possession schedules or anything like that. So that's one of the things you really need to talk to a good attorney about, is what your monetary obligation on child support is going to be, in addition to what your possession time is going to be, because all of those things, can factor in.
Without a doubt. Absolutely going to want to know your arena and know what's in front of you before you walk in.
Well, I think that will wrap us up for our very first episode. We're going to be here probably every week, bringing you an episode. We're going to talk about different areas of law. So we're not just going to confine this to family law. We're going to talk about maybe some criminal stuff that's exciting and important, and maybe some probate stuff if that is of anybody's interest. But like I said, we will talk about family law. We will bring you, some guests from time to time who are experts in various areas of law, and we will have them talk about various areas of law. And the purpose of this podcast is to, kind of provide you information and let you know what's going on, and so you can make more informed decisions. And hopefully we're going to try to entertain you a little bit too at the same time. So
absolutely.
With that, I will thank you for listening to this very first one. And Sam, thank you for explaining everything we need to know about child support. Well, not everything, but thank you for talking to us.
No, thank you. And I look forward to kind of the rest of these. I think it's going to be a blast, and we'll see where we go.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks.
Care. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.